Remember Abraham. There are two ways you can go about getting what you want. One way is through the flesh, and the other by the power of God. One way of making it happen is through works or effort. The other way is through faith. One way is through patience, the other through grabbing a hold of it right now. Which way are you choosing? To one degree or another, God allows us to choose which path we'll follow. We get to choose, but then we have to live with the consequences that God allows. Abraham's destiny was to become a father, not just any father, but a patriarch, a father of nations. Not just any nation or nations, but that through him all the nations of the earth would be blessed. There was a lot hanging in the balance if Abraham didn't have a son. But this is squarely where the problem was. Sarah was barren, Abraham had given her no children, and now they were well stricken in years, beyond the age of having babies. When the promise first came, perhaps there was the possibility that they could still have a baby through the natural means of conception. But as time went on, year after year, the reality became more clear. We cannot have a baby. What are you going to do, Abraham? You know God's calling. You know your destiny. You've seen proof of God being with you. But central to your calling is this baby, and there is no sign of a baby. Unfortunately, Abraham decided to attempt to take the matter into his own hands. If Sarah won't conceive, then I'll make it happen through Hagar, my servant. And voila, it worked. Well, actually, there was produced a fake son. Ishmael was real, of course, and special, made in God's image, and was blessed by God. But by fake, I mean that in regards to God's will for Abraham to have a son, Ishmael was not the son that was the fulfillment of God's promises to Abraham. It may have looked like it at first to Abraham and to others, but God knew all along. Abe, this is the work of your own hands, not mine. This has nothing to do with my word to you. And what is the result of us trying to make God's will happen through our own efforts? Struggle, problems, anger, confusion. This child gave Abraham personal problems, marital problems, problems with his children. Eventually, Abraham had to send Hagar and Ishmael out of the home. It caused division, the loss of loved ones, the breaking up of a home. And in the future, it caused great problems between the descendants of Ishmael and Isaac, all the way down to this very day with conflict between Israel and the Arab nations. When we try to force God's will now, we make a mess of problems, and we don't actually accomplish what God has placed into our hearts. God plants seeds in our hearts, which are meant to germinate, be cultivated, take root, grow, become strong, and eventually blossom and bear fruit. His word will not return void. His will is meant to be accomplished, but in his own time and in his own way. Maybe God has called you to get married, but you're still single and getting older. Don't take it into your own hands. Stay away from pornography. Don't date unbelievers. Don't even consider it. Do not settle for less than God's best. It will cause you perpetual problems, just like it did with Abraham. Wait upon God with patience, and his will come to pass. Even if you are convinced that the situation is impossible, it is settled in your heart. There are absolutely no options here. Don't give up. Romans 4:17-21 says about Abraham, "As it is written, I have made thee a father of many nations, before him whom he believed, even God, who quickeneth the dead, and calleth those things which be not as though they were, who against hope believed in hope, that he might become the father of many nations, according to that which was spoken, so shall thy seed be. And being not weak in faith, he considered not his own body now dead when he was about 100 years old, neither yet the deadness of Sarah's womb. He staggered not at the promise of God through unbelief, but was strong in faith, giving glory to God, and being fully persuaded that what he had promised, he was able also to perform." It was not possible for Abraham to have a child, yet he did. It was the sheer power of God. The same God who called light to come out of darkness called for life and conception in Sarah's womb. This is the same God who conceived in the Virgin Mary, the Son of God. And this is the same God which we believe in and follow today. Perhaps God has called you to some kind of ministry or mission for Him, but it has not yet materialized, and time is running out. You're getting older. You may not even be able to articulate what it is that God has placed into your heart, but you know that something is there. Remember Abraham. Be a son of faith. Believe, trust God to make it happen in His time and in His way. Of course, if there is sin in your life, focus on getting rid of it. If there are character flaws, focus on sharpening them up. Focus on knowing God, worshiping Him, and making Him known to others in the current state that you are in life. Waiting on God doesn't mean sitting down doing nothing, but rather has the idea of being a waiter. Attend to God, please Him. Do what you are able to do right now as you serve Him, and patiently wait for Him to bring you the promotion you are seeking for. I've often reflected on why God planted the seeds of promise in Abraham's heart when He did. I believe it was 25 years or so from the time Abraham received the promise that he would have a son to the time that it actually happened. Why did God do this? Didn't it cause impatience in Abraham and cause him to take actions into his own hands? No. We cannot hold God responsible for dropping what He put into our hands. God knew that Abraham was able to handle the burden, but Abraham failed to be a perfect steward of it. Thank God for His mercy, that although Abraham was not perfect, He did not discard Abraham as His chosen vessel when he messed up with Hagar. God could see the depths of Abraham. He knew that he was faithful and that he would persevere in the end to trust God to make His word of promise come alive. Back to my comment earlier about us being able to choose whether we will take the short, easy route or whether we will defer to the long, windy, uncertain route. The choice is yours. We can choose to sell our birthright for a bowl of beans, our birthright being God's special calling for temporary pleasure. Or we can remember Abraham and follow in his footsteps of taking the long but the right route. Often God's perfect will is a lifelong pursuit. David got to the throne eventually, but as the anointed king, he was shut out of the nation, hunted, defamed, and lied about. But the time finally came when the nation confessed, "We always knew that God had chosen you." My paraphrase. Moses trained for 40 years in Egypt as a prince, then another 40 years in the desert as a shepherd. How about that combination? Do you ever think Moses said to himself in the wilderness, "What am I doing out here?" Then at 80, Moses began to see God's promises come to fruition. Can you imagine the struggle that went on inside the breast of Jesus as he saw corruption in his day? How many times I'm sure he was tempted to stand up, rebuke everyone, and take over the whole nation? Yet he was quiet until it was his time. He waited patiently, perfectly on the Father. There is a time for everything. Right now, it is time for you to faithfully do what you can. There is more, yes, there is more, but let it grow. Let God make it bud, and may God bless you with patience and endurance for the journey. Hebrews 11:1. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Romans 8:24 through 27. For we are saved by hope, but hope that is seen is not hope. For what a man seeth, why doth he yet hope for? But if we hope for that we see not, then do we with patience wait for it. Likewise, the Spirit also helpeth our infirmities, for we know not what we should pray for as we ought, but the Spirit itself maketh intercession for us with groanings which cannot be uttered. And he that searcheth the hearts knoweth what is the mind of the Spirit, because he maketh intercession for the saints according to the will of God.